Hello, it's OC. The nickname I have here stands for Other Chris. As I usually introduce myself, it's OC, the other white meat. Uh, Long story how I got that nickname, but anyway. What is it? It's Wednesday. Yeah. So today was pretty much officially, unofficially, the last day of the course for the year. I'll probably be in there a couple more random times. Nothing substantial, I guess, but it's always kind of a bittersweet thing, you know. It's like, oh, I can finally sleep in, but my body's not going to let me. I'll try, and I'll still wake up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. Uh, it's nice to have the break, um, at least for a little bit, anyway. Soon will be decision time, and what I'm going to do for the winter. Go with the flow. That's what I'm going to do. It's almost Thanksgiving, so yay. Uh, we had a guy come back to the house today, and I'm I'm glad he's. I'm not glad that he relapsed. I'm glad he got back on track and got himself back into the program. And of course, he's going through a lot of shame, guilt. I get it. I've been there. Um, but having more experience and insight from the other side, um, being an ex-addict and having good friends relapse and people I've become very good friends with here relapse and come back, it's another bittersweet moment. It's one of those things. It's like, yeah, I'm glad to see him. I'm glad he's good. He's all right. He's in the right place. You know, um, not necessarily happy about the circumstances, but I'm definitely not judgmental. And that shame is, it's a difficult thing to overcome. I've said it or mentioned it at least in other videos that as addicts and even ex-addicts, I don't think people realize how much we actually internally beat ourselves up. We really do. Create your own reality. It's humbling in some ways, to know people who have graduated, did well in this program, left, at least had all of the appearances of success. To see them come back, um, tail between her legs, full of shame, and it's humbling for them as well. You know, I also kind of consider it it's a lesson in unconditional love too. You have to love people for being people, making mistakes, and going down whatever path and journey they go down. You have to look past some of the actions and choices and decisions. Truly learn how to start to love a person for being a person. Imperfect. Accept them, flaws and all. And I suppose really, as I've stated in the one video, as within so without, it really starts. You can only meet people, and people can only meet you where they're at. So that old cliche about you can't truly love someone until you love yourself. It's true. You can only love another person or a situation or a relationship you're in or a dynamic exchange as much as you love yourself, because that's the only love you've ever experienced. You know. Now, if you're malleable and open-minded enough and willing to grow, of course, this other person or situation can show you a greater love, at which you can learn to love yourself to that same level, continue to grow. Kind of the trick between that. That's not even a trick. That's one of the purposes of what's very popular nowadays is what people call the twin flame journey. It's nothing new. It's been around since the dawn of time. It is one of the deepest, most intense, most trying and painful, as well as rewarding types of soul connections you can have. The theory is that it's two souls one soul who has reincarnated in two bodies. Correct that, or get mixed up in my own head. I'm thinking faster than I can speak. It happens all the time. Sorry. In my experience, anything you read on it or hear about it, they always talk about the mirroring of experiences and this and that. That is true to an extent. Um, Usually, energetically and emotionally is where the true mirroring happens, because mirrors don't just reflect; they reverse. So oftentimes, in my experience, once again, my understanding of this journey as I've been on it, and this is often why there are times it depends on the, and there are some who say there are different types of twin flames, and I suppose there is. Some people, the mirroring is very on a very almost physical, mundane level. Um, Different races, different cultures, different religions, different ages are very common. On others, it's in a very profound, energetic level. Um, One will exhibit, for example, a divine masculine wound, while the other will exhibit a divine feminine, or they'll both exhibit both, but one heals one while the other heals the other, and then they come into contact with each other, and there is essentially an energetic and spiritual exchange at that point, regardless of whatever type of connection it is. There's always an energetic exchange when you meet people and exchange with them. But on twin flames in particular, it gets very intense. There is a lot that is exchanged and processed in what most people would call the 5D. Essentially, your accumulated experience and knowledge in this particular incarnation. Sometimes it goes even farther back. Sometimes it'll go through multiple incarnations. If you have spent multiple lives in separation. Um, that triggers several things. That triggers a massive amount of triggers, not necessarily the word. It brings to surface and it brings awareness to the wounds that haven't been healed. So, in my example, um, me and my twin both suffered from essentially divine masculine and feminine wounds. She had spent a vast majority healing her divine feminine wound, her mother wound. Um, most of my experience came from my father, and I had been spending a lot of time at the time we met focusing on healing that, being a lot more assertive in my life, more masculine, basically. I was raised in a house of women, so. And when we met, everything was great because opposites attract. Well, at some point after the exchange happened, spiritually, energetically, we flipped. The mirroring occurred. And I became very aware of my rejection and divine feminine wounds and vice versa. Um, and that's probably part of what prompted our separation was, so energetically we have now become diametrically opposed and we're no longer magnetized to each other as magnets work. Opposites attract, type of magnetism. It's physics, it's energetics. Well, when those polarities swap, obviously, there's no longer necessarily this pull. There is, spiritually and emotionally, there's still a pull. But what the soul wants to heal has now switched. So there's also a repelling. And how that manifests is through all kinds of different ways, but essentially um, forced through a period of through choices of our own volition, um, because those wounds hadn't been healed, self-sabotaging based on those particular types of wounds to force, at least in my case, to force me to take a very hard look at myself and do the shadow work and do the healing work that needed to be done. Which is why I'm grateful for the soul-crushing heartache, because it didn't break me, it broke me open. Um, and that's the part that a lot of people miss. A lot of people heavily romanticize the whole twin flame, and they miss the purpose of it. The purpose is essentially the experience. You're a soul who has decided to incarnate into two bodies at the same time on this planet. You've essentially split yourself with the purpose of twice the experience, twice the learning, and twice the healing. Well, that also means twice the trauma, twice the wounds, twice the damage, twice the pain. That's the part of it that forgets. And there's never a guarantee that twin flames will be in union. Sometimes they're not even romantic partners. Sometimes it could be family members. It could be, I've heard of people who essentially were twin flames and it was like their grandmother and their grandchildren and stuff like this. It doesn't. It's just another type of soulmate, soul tie, soul connection, whatever, however whatever label you want to use. The resonance. Now, ironically, when you take a high enough perspective, every person on this planet has a soul tie to somebody else. has a soul tied to everyone else, literally. Not just every person, but every living thing on this planet. It doesn't have to be sentient to have a soul. We all come from the same source, regardless of the label or the journey you took, with the purpose of experiencing the creation of the universe. Literally. Simply the most complex thing you will ever try to understand. Because from a certain perspective, it is just beauty and elegant, so simplistic, it's dumbfounding. But then when you start to drill down and you look at the details and the minutiae, it becomes so convoluted, confused, and complex that it's beyond comprehension. Learning to love myself has been one of the more difficult, probably the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. Truly, unconditionally. Which is why I probably say a particular prayer quite often. Is I ask for God, source, the universe, whatever label you want to use, it doesn't matter. Your divine, your divinity, your divine connection. The willingness to love myself the way the universe loves me. Once you reach a certain level of that, extend it. The willingness to love everyone with that same level of unconditional love. Learn to see the beauty in the chaos and learn to see the beauty in people's mistakes. And to know that this is just part of their journey. And to still love them for it. And part of that, the first part of that is through self-love, no longer requiring that person's people, the entities you interact with, to validate you through whatever expectations you have, good or bad. Because that's essentially what self-sabotaging is. You essentially put an expectation on a situation or a person or a relationship to validate your own wounds, traumas, negative thought patterns, negative self-image, low self-esteem, low self-worth. Most of my relapses were that. I got tired of people looking at me and treating me as less than human because they were being judgmental and condescending because they couldn't see past my actions. So, of course, it made me feel unworthy. I'll show them. Want a monster? I gave them a monster. Sounds completely insane, and it is. Oh, you're not loving me the way I expect you to. You're not seeing me, the real me, even though I'm not really showing you the real me through my behavior. I'm showing you something entirely different. Yet I expect you to see the real me through my behavior. But because you're not seeing it, well, I guess, you know what? Instead of changing my behavior, I'm just going to continue to do that behavior. But no, I'm going to amplify it. Projection. So this is a form of projecting the hurt I was feeling from other people because I had certain expectations and those expectations weren't being met. And I felt invalidated and unworthy and all this other stuff. So I just beat myself up more. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's also basically the subconscious mind validating itself because I had a very poor belief of myself due to wounds from my childhood, hell from my birth, literally, um, that had never been properly identified or healed. Or maybe I was never in a place to heal them at that point. Um, yeah, and because I went on autopilot, basically allowed my subconscious mind to start driving my actions, my behaviors, and more importantly, my reactions. It did what it does best. Created a pattern of behavior and reaction and emotional chaos that would validate its own belief. What I had already programmed it with, that I was a piece of shit and that I was worthless. So I would exhibit those behaviors until people treated me as such, validating my belief because I didn't unconditionally love myself. Not that I do now. Of course, I still have things I struggle with. Of course, I still have doubts. But I'm much, much, much more aware of that particular cycle of self fulfilling prophecy, self sabotage. Um, and I check myself on a daily basis. You know, I have people ask me quite often, how is it I can be so authentic and real and vulnerable and it doesn't terrify me? Because I'm at a point in my life where, A, I'm past the age of shame. You know, number one. Number two, I have come to terms with my past to the point where you can't hold it against me. Yeah, I did some fucked up shit. I've made some really crappy situations. I've made some horrible decisions. I've hurt a lot of people. Some of it out of actual malice. I've had dark periods in my life where I was straight up demonic. I burned my horns and my wings. But I've come to terms with that. I've come to peace with it. I've learned how to forgive myself and how to love myself despite those things. Actually, in spite of those things. Because if it weren't for those experiences, I wouldn't be where I'm at now. I wouldn't be who I am now. You know, in 12-step programs, they talk about, I think it's in the promises, maybe the traditions, one of the, anyway, um, there comes a point where you're no longer embarrassed or proud of your past. simply is. So you're not going to shut the door completely on it because that was your experience. And through sharing that, you give others hope, strength, and 12 steps. Give it ways to keep it. Um, but is it something I walk around and broadcast? No. Not everybody can handle my past. I can guarantee you that. Most people wouldn't have survived a day, let alone a year in my life. And I'm not trying to be braggadocious by any means. It's just simple fact. One of my superpowers is I have discovered that I have a tremendous amount of internal strength and resilience, considering all the shit I've put myself through. Oh, it's a miracle I'm alive and walking. Absolutely. It's a miracle I'm not completely insane or have massive amount of brain damage. So, yeah, I don't hate myself anymore. It's a big part of it, really. That, and I have learned and am still learning. It's a never-ending process. The worst thing, not even addict, anyone can ever say is, "I got this." No, don't fool yourself with that. Life is what happens when you make other plans. There's always going to be a new test. There's always going to be another lesson. There's always going to be something else to heal. There's always room for growth. Embrace that. Look forward to it. Yeah, it can be daunting. It can be a little scary. I think it was Denzel Washington who said the motivational speech one time. By the way, you should listen to his story. He was actually homeless, living in his car at one point. Like, the man has come from some pretty low places. Check it out. But, you know, if you're alive right now, guess what? You have a 100% survival rate. Everything life is thrown at you, you have survived. You just gotta start looking at things a little different. There's an old cliche, life is what you make of it. And it's absolutely fucking true. It really is. And the funny thing about it is, a lot of this perspective change, the hardest part about making the choice to change your perspective is making the choice. Once you actually do, once you just surrender to okay, the things I've thought or have believed or have convinced myself were true aren't working in my life anymore. Once you surrender to that and just accept the fact that, all right, that doesn't work anymore. That's the hardest part. That is absolutely the hardest part, because after that, you'll start to very quickly realize, like, wow, I really am starting to understand serenity. I really am starting to, like we say in these rooms all the time. I can't tell you how many times I've been in rehab, and people are like, "Oh, see, you are so fucking smart. What are you doing here?" And I always give them the same answer. If I was so smart, why am I sitting here with you? Obviously, I missed something. It's like I tell guys all the time. This is my 10th long-term intent. In inpatient rehab. That's not counting the dozens or so of fucking detoxes and all the times I quit cold turkey and all this other stuff, right? I mean, I've been on this journey, on this struggle for over 20 years. I mean, really, if I think about it and look back, I've had addict behavior and mentality since I was a kid. victim mentality. And, I tell them, I don't tell you I've been to that many rehabs because I'm trying to brag about it. No. It's because this stubborn, hard head of mine, which is very hard, took me that long to get it. Like, you don't have to do this as many times as I did. Relapse is not a requirement. It is not part of the recovery process. Statistically, highly probable, but it is not. It does not have to be a part. It doesn't. Swallow your pride. Surrender. Just because you made bad choices doesn't make you a bad person. It just means you didn't know any better. Take a vacation from yourself. Let somebody else make some decisions for you. Just for a little while. Until you can do that inner work, until you can heal that self, until you can look yourself in the mirror and hold the gaze in your eye for more than 10 seconds. And then the next step is to be able to look yourself in the eye and mean it. When you get to that point, you're starting to make some progress. And I don't care if you're an addict or not. Every person needs to be able to do that. And not just mean it, feel it. Thanksgiving. Some celebrate it, some don't. What are they calling it now? Indigenous Day or some shit? I don't know. Or is that Columbus Day? In the spirit of Thanksgiving, be thankful for not just all the good things. Be thankful for the bad things too. Be thankful for the lessons. Be thankful for the experience. Because if you didn't have bad experiences, you wouldn't recognize the good ones. It's tough. People struggle with that a lot. They really do. But your brain is programmed for it. Your brain is programmed to remember the painful and hard experiences more than the good ones. It's a survival instinct. That mushroom made me really sick. I'm definitely going to remember that one. So I don't die when I go to eat one. It's literally genetics, folks. It's ingrained into you. Like Thomas Edison said, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I learned 10,000 ways how not to make a light bulb. You just got to change your perspective a little bit. Look at it from a different angle. Learn to love yourself. Something my father used to tell me all the time: be selfish, nobody else is going to do it. And that was a very confusing statement to me for many, many, many years. But it's true in the aspect of self-care and self-preservation. A harsh truth is nobody's here to save anyone else. You're here to save yourself. We'll get into that one in another video about Christ consciousness, essentially Kundalini fire and 33 vertebrae and stuff. So be thankful. Life, it gives you the test first and then the lesson after. So I'm grateful for my health, well-being, my conscious contact with the universe. I'm grateful for all the lessons I have received in my life. I'm grateful that I am learning to love the person that I am, the person I'm becoming. That's the great thing about this process. And you don't have to go through this process to be able to experience and appreciate this. Every day you wake up, you get to remake yourself. That's part of your own divinity. You get to recreate you, and therefore recreate your reality, your life. Remember that, embrace it. Who was it? I think it was the Dalai Lama who said, when asked him what his religion is, he said, religion is kindness. Be kind to yourself. Start there. I know, it's easier said than done. Trust me. I still struggle with it today. Okay, I don't know where all that came from, but there you go. Remember, grant me the willingness to love myself as you love me first. Bless me.